Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking inspiration, and we're going to be taking a look at some of the films that have inspired me and my street photography. I have chosen the films not so much because of their great storytelling, their fine acting, or even their amazing direction, but mostly because of the cinematography, their mood and their style. There are of course many films that I could have selected for this top 10, and I haven't featured any by some of my favourite filmmakers such as Wes Anderson. But what unites these 10 films is that they mostly play out in real-world situations and contain scenes that could perhaps be featured on any street corner at any point in time. I think that's why I'm drawn to them, because I've imagined that I could find similar scenes when out hunting with my camera on any particular day or night. Vivid imagination maybe, but one has to think ambitiously. So here are 10 films counting down from 10 to number 1 that have inspired me to pick up my camera and head on out into the urban environment to shoot the streets. And I'm going to look at some of the pictures I have taken as a result of inspiration from these movies. Because after all, that's what it's all about. So before we start, I must have a sort of honourable mention moment, because I wanted to include something that isn't a movie but is actually a TV series. So obviously I can't include this because it's a 9-part TV series and I can't really compare it to one of the 10 films that I'm featuring in the list. But nonetheless, it has been a big inspiration for me since I first watched it, and still is after several viewings. Severance, in my opinion, is sublime TV. A very stylish, sort of dystopian thriller in which there are some gorgeous scenes and epic moments. The lighting and set are designed around an office complex of endless corridors, lifts and dreamlike spaces. The moody colour palette of blues, greens and accents of red is very stylish indeed, but with a claustrophobic and slightly nightmarish feel to it. Bleak man-made spaces and the psychological effects of technological, social and environmental developments kind of sums it up quite well. There are also echoes of director David Lynch's films and also Stanley Kubrick's 2001, especially with the ever-present low hum of authority that pervades the environment and distracts your thoughts. It leaves you forever feeling that something bad is about to happen. I would go as far as saying that the final episode of Series 1 of Severance, that's episode 9, is possibly the best thing I've ever watched on TV. Ever. So, with that done, we can now move on to my top 10 list of most inspiring films in descending order. James Stewart plays the retired police detective turned private investigator who, following an incident in the line of duty, develops a fear of heights. He is hired to report on the strange behaviour of a friend's wife, played by Kim Novak. It's a story of obsession, manipulation and fear. Shot on location in San Francisco, where Hitchcock wanted to make use of the precipitous streets. Take note, street photographers, using a specific location to gain the required effects. It was the first film to use a technique known as the dolly zoom, where the camera angle is pulled away from the subject while the lens zooms in, distorting perspective to create disorientation, which was used to convey the lead character's fear of heights. Cinematographer was Robert Burks, who had worked previously on 8 films with Hitchcock. The gorgeous visuals are accompanied by the haunting music of composer Bernard Herrmann. The colours, visual effects, camera movements and sound all collaborate to create the mood and atmosphere that Hitchcock desired for his visual masterpiece. These are just some of the reasons it's consistently voted one of the greatest films of all time. At number 9 comes a film from Hong Kong director Wong Kar-wai, and it's his stylish In the Mood for Love, released in 2000, and it has been described as a delicately mannered and visually extravagant, masterful evocation of romantic longing and fleeting moments. Phew, that's quite a mouthful, but set in Hong Kong in 1962, it tells the story of 2 couples who move into neighbouring apartments on the same day. They are formal and polite at first until a discovery about their spouses creates an intimate bond between them. What makes it special for me is the exquisite and sometimes abstract cinematography by Christopher Doyle. Some of the shots are simply breathtaking in their richly saturated colours, innovative composition and very clever framing. Filmed mostly after dark, the streetlights and persistent rain contribute a sumptuousness and intimacy to the scenes. There is a real poignancy as we watch the couple take solace in each other. There are lots of still shots where the characters move in and out of the frame, which helps to emphasise the sense of confinement in the tiny apartments and the cramped living conditions where the characters are ever close to one another. There is a dreamlike beauty that sort of helps to carry the film, saturating the screen with the heat of its colour and the deepening feelings that the couple have for each other. A sensuous soundtrack accompanies the visuals, adding to the mournful yet alluring atmosphere. I don't do a lot of colour photography, but watching films like In the Mood for Love reminds me that I really ought to do more. Paris, Texas is a sort of neo-Western road movie through the American Southwest, and it's one of the great films by the German director Wim Wenders, whose other films include Wings of Desire. Harry Dean Stanton and Natasha Kinski are among the cast of Paris, Texas, and Stanton plays the part of Travis Henderson, a down-and-out reclusive who with his brother and son go on a search for his missing wife, played by Kinski. The film was shot by Robbie Muller, and his images of the Texan landscape and his use of billboards, placards, graffiti, old railway lines, neon signs and motels makes the film feel very real. There is a lot to inspire the street photographer here. When asked about his filming technique, he's not really interested in the technical side of things. He is quoted as saying, "I'm not a technical crazy. It takes a very long time before I get interested in a new camera. Because what's the difference? I have to like the scene anyway. I have to use my own brain and my taste and my personality, and that doesn't change." A lot of the shots in Paris, Texas remind me of the street photography of Stephen Shaw and also Alex Webb and his night shots. I think there is also a link with the artist Edward Hopper here and his realist paintings. The film also features a slide guitar score by Ry Cooder, which although does get a bit repetitive at times, it perfectly accompanies the strong visual flavour of the film. Okay, we're going to cut into the colour here, and the next film on my list is one of the most beautiful black and white films ever made, in my opinion. And there are two higher up on the list that rival it for its charms, but at number 7 is Federico Fellini's 8½. A comedy drama made in 1963 in which Marcello Mastroianni, at the height of his acting talents, plays a film director who is in a bit of a slump and unable to push the production of his new film forward. Thus he spends his time in a spa where his conversations with people help him reflect upon his life. The film is carnivalesque at times, a bit like a circus, heavy on fantasy and with dreamlike scenes that pervade the consciousness, but you can't ignore the visual beauty of it all. Unusual camera positions watch the action unfold, and although the scenes are sometimes quite complex, there is a lot that reminds me of street photography here. Gorgeous animated silhouettes, shimmering light, wonderful depth of layering, and a dash of minimalism and of course some sublime surrealism to cap it all off. This is black and white imagery at its best. It's a photographer's heaven and you just want to be there to capture it all. The Italian filmmakers and photographers from the 1950s and 60s have always been an influence on my photography. Written, directed, produced and co-edited by the Coen brothers, The Man Who Wasn't There is a film from the neo-noir crime genre and another film delectably shot in black and white. However, it was originally shot in colour and converted. There is nothing fancy about the cinematography here. The camera is mostly at eye level, but using a very long depth of field. The skill is in the use of light, which is significant in creating the atmosphere of time and place. The style and mood of some of my pictures has come directly from watching films like The Man Who Wasn't There. Listen to this. John awakens in a hotel with no memory and learns that he is wanted for a series of murders. While seeking answers, he discovers a group of aliens called the Strangers who are controlling the city. Well, that's how Rotten Tomatoes summarises my next choice at number 5, Dark City. The film has been described as Kafkaesque and clearly uses the Twilight Zone as an influence. We're talking science fiction meets horror meets psychological drama here, and it's a great visual achievement. The night scenes in Dark City are some of the best I've ever seen. It's dark, it's stylish, it's visually striking, and it should get you out onto the streets with your camera looking to capture your own scenes of a dark city. Just a reminder here to check out my website for details of my book Fine Art Street Photography, how to turn the urban environment into striking images, and also details about my forthcoming night street photography workshops and personal tuition sessions on both street photography and video editing. Links are in the description to the video below. David Lynch will always be in my top 10 films list for inspiration. In fact, he'd be in any top 10 film list that I made. The trouble is, what David Lynch film do I choose? Well, it comes down to a choice of three. Would it be the surrealist mystery Mulholland Drive, an enigmatic neo-noir visual turn-on that twists dreams with reality? Or perhaps Lost Highway, a mesmerising meditation on the mysterious nature of identity that's been described as a cinematic dreamscape, or perhaps a highway to hell? The limited palette of smooth colour is quite seductive, and this film would be my choice if it wasn't for a film that is quite the opposite in that regard. My choice of film at number 4 is Eraserhead. I'm really getting into the surrealist side of things at the moment, so expect more videos related to that in the near future. And it was also a really good time to re-watch what was David Lynch's first feature-length film after a series of shorts. Eraserhead tells the story of Henry, played by Jack Nance. Has there ever been a more inspired piece of casting? Who is left to care for his grossly deformed child in a desolate industrial landscape. And if desolate industrial landscapes are your thing, you've come to the right place. The environment is a total turn-on for street photographers who love the dark, gritty wastelands of the less salubrious sides of the city. I know I do, and I have spent many hours hunting around in them, inspired by scenes in films like Eraserhead. A heavy contrasty look that has a multitude of things hiding in the dark shadows heightens the tension and Henry's anxiety and lets the viewer's imagination run away with itself. Eraserhead is an exploration of how dark you can go in terms of the cinematography as well as the subject matter. It reminds me of the days of shooting film and pushing Ilford HP5 a few stops and then highly agitating it during development. Great fun. Bernardo Bertolucci's The Conformist, released in 1970, is a very elegant but chilling drama based on the novel of the same name by Alberto Moravia. Set in the Italy of the 1930s, The Conformist centres around the story of a mid-level fascist functionary who is ordered to assassinate his former professor and anti-fascist dissident. His mission is complicated after he begins an affair with the professor's wife. Coming quite early on in Bertolucci's career, the film uses a sort of flashback structure and has a rich design that reflects the striking architecture of the Mussolini era. Cinematography is by Vittorio Storaro, and many scenes are quite stunning with some wonderful sequences, including one using the geometry of the lines of a dress crisscrossing with the shadows from a Venetian blind. The cinematography can be seen reflected in the later work of directors Martin Scorsese and Francis Ford Coppola, who were certainly influenced by the film. Storaro went on to work on Apocalypse Now and The Last Emperor. He is known for his stylish, fastidious and flamboyant fashion sense. And Francis Ford Coppola once noted that Vittorio is the only man that I ever knew that could fall off a ladder in a white suit into the mud and not get dirty. With artful compositions, dynamic viewpoints and some very beautiful light, from a street photographer perspective, it can't fail to inspire and trigger the imagination. It's a film about life amongst the shadows. The light, shadow and geometry of The Conformist have been a big inspiration for my pictures, such as these here, over the years. At number 2 in my list is Ida by the Polish director Paweł Pawlikowski, and it's a very beautifully shot, minimalist road movie. It's a film I recommend to my photography and filmmaker students as a prime example of less is more. Set in Poland in 1962, the film tells the story of a young woman on the verge of taking vows as a Catholic nun. She meets her aunt, a former communist state prosecutor and her only surviving relative, who tells her that her parents were Jewish. The two women then embark on a road trip into the Polish countryside to learn the fate of their relatives. We are not told much about the country's recent past and the effects of the war, but the film's mood and atmosphere describe it to us without the need for words. Each scene is like a Vermeer or a classic photograph. Ida is a masterclass on how to use natural light and how to compose an image. The black and white has a low contrast look to it, and the many single camera still shots frame the characters low in the screen, leaving an emptiness above, helping to emphasise the post-war austerity and atmosphere of Poland at the time. Also, the use of sound in the film is quite profound. During an opening scene that shows the convent nuns eating in their dining room, the only sound you can hear is that of their spoons in the bowls as they eat their soup. The only use of music is during the scenes featuring the aunt, who is determined to enjoy herself at night despite the sombre nature of their trip. I have found no end of inspiration in watching Ida. Each scene makes you want to press pause and appreciate it like you would a picture in an art gallery. I almost want to leave it there on the screen, like a picture on the wall, so that it'll always be there whenever I walk into the room. And at number 1 in my list of top 10 films that have inspired my street photography is Jacques Tati's Playtime. Jacques Tati's 1967 masterpiece is 2 hours of some of the most beautiful cinema you will ever see. Each frame is cram-packed with light, colour, geometry, style, and the most perfectly choreographed movement that will have you glued to the screen. Beautifully choreographed with characters moving around the scenes in almost balletic fashion. It's like a very skilled piece of live theatre being played out on a gigantic stage. The cinematography, courtesy of the celebrated French-Hungarian director of photography Jean Badal, is a joy to behold. With a colour palette consisting of subdued greys, blues and greens, the effect feels very modern even by today's standards. The majority of scenes feature sort of glass and steel, but the look is punctuated by notes of deep reds, purples and brighter greens. For example, the airport cleaner's broom head and the inside of his dust collector are red, as are the paper flowers seen decorating the hair of the lady tourists who are escorted through the airport to the waiting coaches outside. Elsewhere, flashing red and green lights on an expansive looking control panel in an office reception puncture the monotone feel with strong hits of colour. Many scenes look like classic street photos, carefully framed and composed, and with that crucial sense of timing that captures the decisive moment. Every inch of the screen has been thought about with just the right amount of detail, never too much and never too little. For the street photographer, Playtime is inspiration itself. Reflections abound in the layers of glass and steel surfaces, and a geometric display of lines, shapes and forms creates a very modern and stylish environment, redolent of today's cities and urban spaces. If watching Playtime doesn't have you grabbing your camera and heading out into the streets to look for stunning photos, then nothing will. Well, those are the 10 films that have most inspired me from a photographic point of view, and the 10 that continue to do so many years after first seeing them. But what have I left out, and in your opinion, what should I have included, and what should we be watching for inspiration? Let us know in the comments what your favourites are and what would make your top 10 list. Thanks for watching, see you next time.